This is Love Notes, daily devotions from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Grace and peace to you. Our text today is Luke, the 10th chapter, verses 25 through 37. In this world that we inhabit today, I see in social media and in other forums a call for us to be kinder, more gentle, and Lord knows we need that. The entire world seems to be out for themselves and undergirds that claim with the threats of violence, harsh words, arguments. So a little more kindness could go a long way. But the question we have to ask is, what keeps us from kindness? What keeps us from being compassionate people? Well, one of the stories that is offered in Luke's gospel that talks about it is what we conventionally call the Good Samaritan. Although that's really a terrible name for it. The Good Samaritan implies that there's a whole bunch of bad Samaritans. It's like saying the parable of the good Jew, or the parable of the good American, or the parable of the good Lutheran. It says that there's a whole bunch of bad ones. It's kind of an insult. But the story still stands on its own as a parable of one who was robbed and beaten and put in a ditch. It happens in the context of a test. We're told just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. To stand up when somebody is speaking, a rabbi, a figure of authority in an ancient context, is to challenge them and to set up a contest on who's going to come out the winner. So this is a gentle attack. And the testing here, the word that's used for test, is the same word that was used when Satan tested Jesus in the wilderness, when Satan tempted him in the wilderness. So a lawyer, someone who knew the law, someone who was wise and intelligent, which isn't a compliment, challenged Jesus and tempted him. He addresses him as teacher, not as Lord, not even as master. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? One commentator notes that if there are 4 strikes in the game that's being played at this point, then he's got 4 strikes on him. He's challenged Jesus. He's tempting him like Satan. He's called him teacher instead of what he really is, Lord. And now he asks a silly question. What must I do to inherit eternal life? In other words, how do I get this for myself? Well, the truth of the matter is, to inherit something, you have to be an heir. And you can't earn being an heir. You either are or are not the family of the deceased. Only Jesus is the heir, the Son of God. Only Jesus is the Son who can impart eternal life. If Jesus says you are to be adopted, then you might be an heir, but there's nothing this man can do to inherit eternal life. So Jesus said to him, what is written in the law? This challenge and riposte situation starts to go back and forth. What is written in the law? What do you read there? The man answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. He searches back into the Torah, and he finds this summary, which would have been known to anybody who knew anything about Judaism at the time. Jesus said to him, you have given the right answer. Do that, and you'll live. In other words, live congruently with what God desires you to do, and you'll have eternal life. Now, this whole thing could end right here. But the man isn't satisfied because he hasn't won the argument yet. It says, but wanting to justify himself, wanting to make himself look big, wanting to defeat Jesus, he asks him further, who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? It's not a question that really asks about what is the philosophical status of the neighbor. The language here is, who is the one closest to me that I should take care of? It's not a philosophical or theological question about the makeup of neighbors on a cosmic scale. It's a question about who here, who in my life is my neighbor? Who should I be concerned about? So Jesus replies with a story. The man wants a boundary, a definition. Who is close enough to love? And so Jesus gives him a story to explicate that. He says, a man, any man, was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Jerusalem is always up. It's on a mountain, and so everything around it is down. And Jericho is a particularly steep decline down. So this road goes down to Jericho, tells us the direction that it was traveling, from Jerusalem to Jericho. He fell into the hands of robbers. Apparently this was a dangerous road, and it happened all the time. They stripped him, they beat him, and they went away, leaving him half dead. This any man, could be anybody, has now become every man because we all suffer. So far, what's our progress on defining a neighbor? Maybe the clue is it's everybody, or everybody in need, everybody you come across. Now, by chance, it says a priest was going down that road. That means he's heading also from Jerusalem to Jericho. Sometimes commentators say, well, he was headed up to Jerusalem, and so he didn't stop, which is the outcome here. He doesn't stop and tend the man because it might make him ritually unclean. He couldn't do his job as a priest. The text doesn't suggest that. He's headed down to Jericho. The man's done with his duties in the temple for now, and so he's got nothing to lose. It also imagines that the people of Judea were more concerned about the law and keeping it than they were about helping people, and that's just wrong. Any Jew, any rabbi, any good teacher of Israel at the time would have said that no matter what, you got to help the guy when you find him. That makes the crowd understand that this priest is an exception, not the rule, and that he has made a bad choice, even though he's a priest. It says, so likewise a Levite. Well, a Levite is part of the priestly and caste of Israel, and when he comes down to the place and saw him, it says comes down to the place, he saw him pass by on the other side. He didn't want to get anywhere near him. Again, he violates everything that is good about Judaism. You're supposed to be concerned about a guy laying in a ditch, but he doesn't want to get involved. Now, at this point, we should probably be asking ourselves, what is it that makes us drive by? What is it makes us not care? What makes us think this isn't my problem? If we've ever done that, then we are the priest and the Levite. Now Jesus really turns the story upside down. The crowd is shocked that a priest or a Levite would leave a man in a ditch. And we know that Jesus has been rejected by the Samaritans, who didn't want to hear what he had to say, and that the Jews and the Samaritans hate each other. So Jesus now says, but a Samaritan, and they would have all gone, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity, as all of us should be. And he went to him, and he bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, 2 days' pay, and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend. I've got everything covered. A Samaritan, not a priest, not a Levite, not one of their trusted officials, but a Samaritan whom they hate is the one who had pity and compassion, as we should all. And the question becomes then, who was a neighbor to the one in the ditch? Jesus has turned the man's question upside down. The man's question was, who should I help? Jesus' answer is, you're a neighbor to everybody. The man answers, well, I guess the one that showed him mercy is his neighbor. And then he says, go and do likewise. There's the answer to your question about eternal life. Go and do likewise. A neighbor is one who acts like a neighbor. It's not a semantic definition. It's not a category of being. And being a neighbor is not about the person that hurts. It's about you being a neighbor to those who've been left in the ditch. Who do you come across? In summary, we can only imagine why the first two did not help the man who was lying nearly dead in the ditch. But we can look to ourselves and answer the question of why, can't we? We can figure out why it is that we pass by the suffering of this world instead of helping. What keeps us from having mercy and pity on people? Mercy and compassion, we should also note from this, know no boundaries. We can all, insiders and outsiders alike, possess the mercy and the care and the compassion of Christ. It's in us. We are created in God's image. And so to follow Christ is to be a neighbor to all.